going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
It's a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people out go, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different. There are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer, but you probably know that if you're watching us live right now. That means you're a patron. Thank you so much for being a part of the Around the Galaxy family. And, every week you get the links to the shows. You have an opportunity to be a part of it. We're going to be looking for your comments during the show, as we always do. Bring you in where it makes some sense. And thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Tonight we have a really special guest. We have a gentleman who is known as the most listened to radio voice in South Georgia. I'm probably getting that a little bit wrong. I think I'm pretty close on that. His name is Scott Ryfun. He is from Brunswick, Georgia. He is the morning talk show host on WGIG, and he and I sort of discovered each other through social media, as you do, and he has a really cool and interesting Star Wars story to tell. So let me just skip with the all the intros, and let me just bring in Scott. Scott, how are you doing?
Oh, yeah, after that intro, how can I not be doing great? Because it's like, look at all these guys, and then, oh, by the way, this guy nobody's ever heard of.
No, you're the most listened to voice in South Georgia. I think that puts you among the greats, right?
Well, it puts me in the greats in this little tiny box right on the shelf. It's like on The Jerk when he's trying to show you where the prizes go. It's to the left of the stereo and above the pencils.
No, I am excited to have you here because you also you work with iHeart, and you have blogs, and you've had a podcast and that I think you still run. It's probably not been as active. You've even said that yourself. But you are, most importantly to us here today, you are a huge Star Wars fan. So, Scott, for the people who don't know you, maybe give us a little bit of your background.
A little bit of my background. Now, where do you want me to start? Good grief. I mean, that's, and I like, you always promote this as being like an hour conversation, and just asking me where to start. That's because, I'll go back to the first time I heard of Star Wars.
Let's start there. Where did where did you hear of Star Wars, and how did it enter your life?
Yeah, because I've got a freaky brain. And it remembers things, and like I go back and verify things just to kind of tweak, make sure it's right. My wife refers to me as a pack rat. Mm-hmm. I call it archivist. I think somewhere in the middle is probably the truth.
It's all semantics.
Yeah, I'm 6 years old. My brother comes home from school with a Read magazine. Do you remember these Scholastic Read magazine?
Oh yeah, the ones that we used to get them in like second or third grade, right?
It was like a little 2-color magazine. Mm-hmm. And he came home and it had Star Wars, and he comes and says, "This is going to be the best movie that's ever been made." And it's coming, we're going to see it soon. And so I start looking at this, and I look through, and it's, it's got the story of Luke Skywalker is going to be in it. And they had a picture of, well, it turned out in 2-color print, it was an X-Wing on its side with a TIE fighter behind it. That shot, it was kind of used a lot. But in 2-color print, I thought it was a guy in a spacesuit with his arms up like this and his legs splayed out. And I thought he was Luke walking the sky. Makes sense, right?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely.
We go flash forward to summer vacation. This was always one of those weird things for me. We go to summer vacation, and every time we would stop at convenience store to get gas, I would go in and look at magazines and comic books and books, because books have always just been a thing that I've loved. And I found Warren magazine. You remember Warren? Warren had this Star Wars special. It was, the whole book, nothing but Star Wars. And I said, hey, this is that movie that you said was going to be the best movie ever. And I want to get this. And so I ran to my mom, can you get this for me? And so I got this magazine. I tear this magazine up through vacation. And we get home and Star Wars is still not playing in my theater. This always, like in retrospect, kind of made me a little weird, because I knew as a teenager the movie came out May 25th, and I knew I saw it the first day it was here.
Right.
But I also knew that we usually went on vacation in July, so I literally went to the library and started going through newspapers trying to figure this out.
Right.
Because I knew I had to have seen it in July. It makes sense. And finally, I found the ad. July 29th is when it started here in Brunswick. Can you imagine, like, in this day and age of 5,000 screen releases day and date?
It's funny when I speak to like guests of mine who are from the UK. I mean, they didn't get it till December. Can you? Yeah. I mean, that's a weird, like, for like my son can't imagine not seeing something the day it's released. Through, especially now with pandemic, right? You're getting in theater and at home, and now you're like, it's not even a different country. It's just a different part of the country, and it hasn't shown up in Georgia until end of July.
Yeah, I get it. July 29th. Conversely, a buddy of mine burns me a VCD of Attack of the Clones 5 days before it comes out.
Right. Yep.
But yeah, so July 29th it comes out. It's at Lanier Theater. It's in the right-hand theater. We got there early. I had to sit there in agony because my mom is one of those very by the book. The rules are the rules. So mom takes us to the movies. I'm 6, and she's going, we didn't pay to go see this showing. I'm going, Mom, can we just go in? No, you have to wait outside the theater, and you can go in after the movie's over. Now, I don't know if you remember this or not, but back then, most movie theaters, they didn't have doors. Like, they've all got doors now because there's 78 theaters in one thing, and you don't want the sound to leak all over the place. But then they just kind of had a wall, and you walk around it to get into the theater. So you sit outside, and you can hear everything. And I'm dying. And so my brother and I, we go in there. My brother's been telling me for months, it's going to be the greatest movie ever made. We sit down, and, I don't think I need to describe the first time I saw it. I mean, I think we all get that.
Yeah. Yep.
But I remember walking out and saying to my brother, that was the greatest movie ever made. And my brother said, oh, you don't know that.
He builds up
3 months.
I'm guessing an older brother, right?
He's 6 years old. He brought Star Wars into the house, and I grabbed it. He brought Kiss into the house. I grabbed it.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And it's interesting too, because at that time, there was no spoilers, and you were just hungry for every piece of information you could get. I think Star Wars was the movie that made me so interested in the way movies are made, because if there was like the making of special, I wanted to see how they did that, because that was as close as I was going to get to Star Wars.
Our generation were kind of the first ones that were like, oh, blue screen. Sure. That's a blue screen shot. I see that. I can tell by the outlines, Oh, that's a matte painting. We would speak in film language.
Yep.
It's funny because when I went to college, I minored in film, and that was one of the things that I came back. Well, that's a 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio, and that's 2.35 because it's in scope, and nobody else talked like that. But now, because DVDs and Blu-rays, and they have commentaries, and they're like film school in a box.
Sure. Yep.
Like everybody talks like that now.
Yep.
But back then we were all techie because of these movies.
Yep. And it's and then there was sort of this explosion of wannabe Star Wars movies. Did you get into like everything science fiction that came out, or did you was there something about Star Wars that sort of kept you on target there?
Well, there was a hierarchy, right?
Right.
I mean, there was Star Wars.
Yep.
And then there was everything else, but everything else was there. I mean, yeah, I went and saw Superman, and I went and saw The Black Hole, and I went and saw Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and Flash Gordon in 1980.
Yeah.
And watched them all on HBO because you couldn't get Star Wars on HBO. See, that's the other thing, is we kind of, a lot of us glommed onto those things because the choice for Star Wars was you could either see it when it came back around,
right,
or you could watch the Give a Show projector, or the what's the name?
Geez, like the little Mattel, the little like, it was
Kenner made that with the cartridges.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of it because I never got it. I had the Give a Show.
Yeah,
or you could listen to the book and record,
Mm-hmm.
or you could do, probably my favorite thing was read the Marvel adaptation over and over again.
Yep.
But, you know, then when something else came out that was kind of like it, then you went and saw it. You went and grabbed it. You know, that was it. So
that, you know, it's funny you say that the book and tape, the album. I think that's why I was able to memorize every line from Star Wars, was that story of Star Wars with R2 and 3PO on the cover, and me and my best buddy growing up. It was either at his house after school or mine, and we just listened to that thing over and over and over. And then it was funny because now I remembered when we got it on VHS, there were lines that were in the movie that weren't on the record.
Oh yeah, well,
I was all thrown up.
Yeah, the record wasn't that long, so and you know, you didn't have Roscoe Lee Brown narrating the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was part of it. And the other thing that I did to memorize Star Wars was when it finally, in 1983, when it finally came on HBO. Of course, I put the cassette deck up next to the speaker, you know, the handheld cassette machine, and put it next to the speaker, and I recorded the heck out of that thing. And I would just play it back and listen to it and listen to it and listen to it. And so, yeah, I mean, after a while, you know, you listen to Greedo enough, you kind of got it reasonably enough.
Yep. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's such I hate to sound like the, kids today just don't understand, but I mean, the reality is it was such a different way to take in a story. And maybe that's why it became so important to us.
Yeah, and it is a different thing, and it's not those kids today necessarily, but really a lot of it is we knew the world before. Actually, I don't even know how old are you, Pete? You've been around, right?
I've been around. I'm 51. Yeah,
you're 51. I'll be 51 next month.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, thank you very much. And but we knew a world before Star Wars, and then we rode that wave as it came in, and there really has never been anything like that since, mostly because of Star Wars, because everybody tried to create this momentum of merchandise and all of that, and the marketing and everything. Everybody kind of grabbed what Star Wars did and tried to make it work for themselves. And of course, everybody's had limited success, but nobody's done what Star Wars did, which was literally just transform an entire culture. We lived, breathed, slept, drank, and ate Star Wars.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of talk about, kids getting picked on for being nerdy and all that. That really wasn't my experience because everybody on the playground loves Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny to look back at that. That's an interesting comment because I think I don't ever remember being called out for being a Star Wars fan. I think when Star Wars disappeared after Jedi, then I'll never. I mean, I used to at my old job. I used to have Star Wars figures, action figures, on my desk just because I'm a nerd. And I remember there was this I'm perpetuating the stereotype. There it is. I'm responsible for it. But I remember one of the women in the office stopped by and said, "Oh, my son loves Star Trek," and I was like, not the same, but I'm not going to fight you on it.
Molars are grinding.
Right. I like it too.
No, but it's funny. You say you never really got called out as a kid. When I'm 15, what did you do last night? Oh, I watched the Battle for Endor.
Right.
Then you get a little grief and harassment, but I just stood my ground. I'm just, I was always one of those guys that I never, ever, 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 I was not a guy who went with the flow. I didn't go with the trends. I wasn't fashionable. I have very little to regret in old pictures. My hair was exceedingly long at one point, but I don't even, it's funny because every so often somebody will get a hold of one of those in a yearbook or something and try to put it on Facebook to embarrass me. And I go, yes, it's great. If my wife would let me, I'd do it again. What's the problem?
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of regrets like that. So it never bothered me that other people, had left Star Wars behind. The only thing, actually, it didn't bother me because then I could go scoop things up. I could go to, KB Toys and gosh, they've got a small stack of Chewbacca bandolier straps for 99 cents. Let me get them all.
Yeah.
I'll put those away.
If only we knew, like that would have been like investing in Apple stock at that moment. Go ahead.
There was a period in the early 90s when Marvel was in huge trouble and their stock was down to like 3/8 of a dollar. Remember when they used to do stocks and fractions?
Yep.
It was down to like 3/8 or something. And I tell my dad, hey, Dad, if we put $100 or $1,000 into Marvel, just put $1,000 into Marvel. I think we could do something with it. I'm not doing that. I ain't got $1,000. Boy, we'd have cashed out when Disney bought them. I wouldn't. I'd buy it around the galaxy. I would own you, Pete.
It's all right, and I would sell. I'm not ashamed to say it.
You and every one of the helmets on your shelf back there would be mine. So
we'll take it. Just put us in a nice little studio that's not a closet somewhere, and we'll make it work.
I'll do it.
But I see, for those who are listening, Scott is wearing an Heir to the Empire shirt. So Scott is, for those of you who don't know, he is a tremendous collector of Star Wars books, and you were telling me before you had this whole continuity bookshelf. Tell me a little bit about how you got into the books. I mean, how is a silly question because it was the only thing that was there. But when did you discover Heir to the Empire, and how did that strike you? Because that was a big deal for the fans like you and I who had it, at that impressive moment, and then it came back, and we were at a good and a unique age for it.
Yeah, well, I was in college. I was several years into college, and I was enjoying the Star Wars aspect of college because certain people cared, and that was cool. And I would meet those people, and I didn't really care about the rest of them. But also, I could go to comic shops and go to the quarter bin and restock my old Marvel collection. Right. I had a treat. My dad built by hand for my 7th birthday, built me an amazing treehouse. And I thought it would be a great idea to move my comic collection up to my treehouse where I could go be alone and read my comics. And I had a huge number of Star Wars comics because when I was a kid, I mean, that was what you did anytime you saw a convenience store. And I could tell you the best convenience store racks in town. This one's going to have some good stuff in it. That one, never really very good. But I always bought Star Wars. Marvel Star Wars for me was Star Wars when we didn't have, talked about, what do you do till the movie comes back around and everything. Marvel Star Wars was just as Star Wars as everything else. And so, but I lost a lot of them because my treehouse started leaking. Oof. And a lot of rain got into them. And my parents just went with a shovel and went, this is all one big blob of paper now. It's going out. So the treehouse betrayed me. Ultimately is what happened there. But so when I got to college, though, you'd go to quarter bins and you could buy, Marvel Star Wars books were in there for, a quarter each, and you buy tons of them. So I literally just kind of restocked my old Marvel Star Wars collection that I'd missed. And so again, nobody's fighting you for these things. Right. Nobody's battling you for these things. They'll have a couple of collectibles show up. Somebody got a hold of an unopened lot at Cosmic Cat in Tallahassee, an unopened lot of Jabba the Hutt playsets. The Kenner, the ones I'm talking about. And they sold them for, I think, $24 each. And my girlfriend at the time got me one as a gift. And so, so I've got an unopened Jabba the Hutt playset from 84. Wow. And, and we got it for $24. That's it. You didn't have to fight for this stuff. But what I remember a couple of things. One, I remember buying a Marvel preview book, and I can't remember what it was. It wasn't Marvel Age, but it was one of those, here's what Marvel's going to put out next year. And they had this write-up about this Dark Empire thing they were going to publish next year. And I guess this might have been 1990. And I'm looking forward to this. Wow, Marvel's going to publish Star Wars again. Well, it never happened. Right. But they did preview it in that little book, just a little blurb and one illustration. And then I would buy previews every month. And you know what previews is. Yep. Diamond's catalog. Yep. And I'm flipping through that. I always turn straight to the book section to see what books were coming out. And there is a Star Wars novel, Heir to the Empire. And I'm like, well, I got to get this. I mean, this is, no brainer. So I go to my comic shop in Tallahassee, Cosmic Cat, and I go pre-order it, which I didn't usually pre-order anything. I just usually walked in and grabbed what was on the rack. Right. But I had to pre-order this. Got to make sure I get it. Didn't remember that this was for May, and school in Tallahassee got out at the end of April. Okay. So I'm back home working my job, my summer job, and which was in the mall. And I know the day that the book is going to come out. I've been keeping up with this. So I know what day the book's coming out, and I realize mine's in Tallahassee. So I call Walden Books that morning, and here's what I'm thinking, and I think you'll understand this. I worked at Camelot. You remember Camelot?
Yeah. Was that the record store?
Yeah. Yep. I worked at Camelot, and there were certain things like a big release. We got boxes of it to be released day and date, right? And if there was some schmutzy, nobody cares about it release, it'd show up with a regular shipment later, and you get one or two of them. Right. No big deal. And that's kind of where I thought Heir to the Empire was, because I bought Star Wars 3D and nobody else did.
Right.
And so, I thought it was going to be kind of as poorly received as everything else at the time. And I called my buddy at Walden Books once I got to work, and I said, "Hey, did you guys get the Star Wars book today? I'm just, kind of hoping." And he said, "Oh yeah, we had it." I said, "What do you mean you had it?" He said, "Well, we had a whole dump bin of them. They're gone." I said, "Well, you've only been open a couple hours." He said, "They're gone. Every single one of them sold." And I'm going, okay, this is not good because mine's in Tallahassee. And again, it's one of those you got to have a day of.
Right.
And so I called around. There was another guy I knew had a bookstore, and he actually had one copy left when I called him. And he said, "Well, that was the one I was saving for me." And he said, "Bud, if you get over here right now, I'll let you have it." So I zipped over there, took my lunch break early, got the book, came back, started reading it. And then when I got back to Tallahassee, I had to pick up the one I'd already pre-ordered. So I had 2 copies of it. Now, I didn't open the other one. And eventually I got a Mylar cover for the dust jacket, and it's still intact.
Wow.
It's never been cracked fully open. It was opened at Celebration Orlando in 2017 when I got Zahn to sign it.
Wow.
But other than that, it's never been touched. The pages have never really been touched. Nothing. It's perfect. Now, here's the thing. At the time, I'm majoring in creative writing with emphasis on fiction.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a well-written book. It means so much to me because it really brought Star Wars roaring back.
Right. Yep.
And I've read it probably 3 times, and every time I just go, "Oh, this is not a well-written book." But it did so much to advance things. And I remember that whole summer as I was, waiting to go back to school. I remember following the New York Times. We got the Sunday paper from Jacksonville, and the Sunday paper would always have the top 10 bestsellers, and it was always 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Just it never left the bestseller lists. It was amazing, and I knew something's going on. Something's going on. A couple of months before that, Mugs and Movies would do midnight movies on Saturday, and they showed Star Wars. And again, same girlfriend and I went. I've got to go see Star Wars on a big screen. Now they would literally project a VHS onto their screen,
right?
Pan and scan and everything. But when I got there, we couldn't get in.
Wow.
I didn't think anybody cared, and then all of a sudden, here it is. We can't get into Star Wars.
Right.
So I knew something's starting to happen here. Something big is happening. So Heir to the Empire means a lot to me. I was so glad they made the shirt, and I will gladly buy the shirt. But it's not a well-written book.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because there's a group of us, a little text group we go back and forth, me and a couple other podcasters, a guy named Jerry, the Canon Junkie. He's a big, he's a nerd on this stuff. And we started talking a lot about Heir to the Empire because of Bad Batch and things like that. And maybe we'll get into that. But so with the 2 of us, a bunch of us, actually all 4 of us, I think, are going back and checking it out. And that was the first thing Jerry said was it needs some updating as a book. And I remember that was my biggest challenge with, and a lot of the early Star Wars books was they felt like they were more science fiction to me than they were Star Wars. And I think it was an interesting growth period because I don't know if the authors at that time kind of recognized that Star Wars, they hired science fiction authors to write Star Wars, which, it's just like Frank Herbert's Dune. It's not just straight up sci-fi. There's a lot of things going on there. And Zahn is, as to say what you will about him as an author one way or the other, this was, he had a good story. I mean, the Heir to the Empire story is really a very interesting story. But I would agree with you. It's not an easy book to read.
No. And it starts off so well because it starts with the Star Destroyer and you go, okay, perfect.
Yep.
And then it starts to sag. Now, here's the funny thing. The next book, obviously, and I'm a struggling college student. I was happy to be able to afford 2 copies of the $15 book. But the next one's going to be 1995, so you got to watch out. And one of my writing classes was a journalism class, and one of the things they did was they made us write a book review. So they said, "Here's what we want you to do. We want you to call a publisher, tell them you're going to write a review for Chauncey Mabe at the Tampa Bay Tribune, and you're going to get a book from them, and you're going to write a review, and you're going to send it to them. That's going to be your class exercise." Okay. So I called Bantam, and can I talk to the Bantam? I guess Bantam Spectra. I'm trying to do a college project, trying to write a book. or trying to write a review of a book, and I'm going to send it to Chauncey May, the Tampa Bay Tribune. And well, what are you interested in? Well, science fiction. I'm fishing to see if they'll send me, like a galley of Dark Force Rising. Science fiction. I'm kind of into science fiction. And so they say, okay, well, we'll send you something. So I get this galley proof of some book, first time author. I don't know that he really ever wrote anything else. It's not a particularly great book either. But I tried, and I wrote the review. I sent it like we were supposed to, and I got it back and saying, thank you for sending this. We're rejecting it, which, you as a guy who's written, that happens a lot.
Sure. Yep.
And, but it still was in my head. I thought, as we got closer to the release date for that book, I thought, maybe I'll just call him and hit him up for that book.
Sure.
So I said, all right, I'm going to do this. And so I called him again and said, hey, do you have a copy, a galley proof of Dark Force Rising? You could send it to me, and I'll write a review for it, and I'll send it to Chauncey May at the Tampa Bay Tribune. And they said, oh, well, we don't have galley proofs of that anymore. Okay. But we could send you just the finished book, because we do have those. Okay. I will take that. Yes. So a couple days later, UPS guy drops it off at the house. And, I'm already out of school for the year because it's May. And I read it, wrote a review, sent it to Tampa Bay Tribune, got a rejection letter back, but I fulfilled my obligation.
Right. And you got to read a Star Wars book before everybody else did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So not too shabby.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, there's something to that first that first sort of preview copy of anything you get that's really there's a special feeling for that. Yeah. And that's wild. And then so you ended up literally collecting just about every single book that was written between then and up until when are you still collecting? I mean, it's hard to keep up with the books that are coming out now, whether I'll ask your opinion on them in a moment, but it just feels like there's like a dearth of content. There's if I'm using that word appropriately, there's so much stuff. It's really hard. Yeah, I always get that confused. There's so much stuff.
More of a glut than a dearth, I guess.
Glut, right? That's the better term. Are you still keeping up with it, or did you stop at a certain point?
Yeah, I backed off about 3 or 4 years ago. Just finally took the brakes off. The room that you see around you, which is totally empty right now, was over full. The shelves were full. The continuity shelf went to hell because they restarted everything. And look, I don't blame them for that. I'm not a bring back Legends guy. I was attached to Legends, not because the stories were so good, but because the stories, I like a big story woven into a large tapestry.
Yep.
But I knew the second Disney bought Lucasfilm, I told my friends that we were sitting at a table at Denny's when that all went down. And I said, Expanded Universe is gone. It's gone. And they went, why? And I said, well, because if they're going to release a movie that's set 30 years after Return of the Jedi, which I think they said that day.
Yeah, it was close to it. Yep.
Yeah. I said, if they're going to release a movie that takes place significantly after Return of the Jedi, they're not going to want to get the mainstream audience to catch up with all of the gazillion different things that have happened to these characters in the interim.
Right.
And they're not going to want to be beholden to all of those things. Yeah. And, those of us who are fans of the books have to understand that the number of people who buy books, unfortunately, is this little tiny thing compared to the number of people who buy movie tickets and watch videos.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. I mean, I was talking about that recently, about the fact that you sort of have this pyramid of, you have the movie folks, then you have now it's Disney Plus, I guess, is where you would put the next sort of thing. And it's probably books, then comics, because I was thinking about it, because from a perspective of, even with the promise of canon and continuity, with the disillusion of the legend stuff, even in that, there's been a handful of things that something appeared in a cartoon or in a comic book rather, that is changed in animation. And so there is certainly a hierarchy there. But to your point, yeah, I mean, people need to remember that Disney, Lucasfilm, anybody, Paramount, Universal, whoever, they're making a business decision. And if that means that they have to change the color of a guy's uniform because it's going to work better in the film is going to win every single time. And to your point, with, I mean, how many books was it? I mean, how many books? 49 boxes worth, you said, right? When you moved them out. there's just and some of it, even within that, the continuity at times was a little bit
it got sketchy,
inconsistent.
Yeah. And then you have to worry about Trioculus and all that stuff. So,
right. Yeah.
Which, by the way, that whole the David's books, the Glove of Darth Vader and all that stuff, Lost City of the Jedi, those have to be probably on the scale of best cover versus worst book. They have to be the widest gulf there, right? Because you got Drew Struzan with these great covers. Drew is just amazing artist. Yeah. Everything he does is gold and magic. And then you got those stories.
Yeah, those were stories that really, it's funny, and I think that's part of the reason for myself personally, I can't keep up with the comics. And even back in the day, the comics you were talking about, I was not as attached to them because comic book stories tend to go down that Trioculus kind of route of just wow. And I think that's, I mean, I don't know where I'm going with that other than to say, I think that was, again, part of my problem with those earlier Star Wars books is they didn't fit that Star Wars sort of genre. I mean, I've said it a lot recently that Star Wars has become sort of its own genre. It's spaceships and wizards and stories about family and evil and good. It's everything for everybody. And I think that's kind of a part of the problem with those books was they were going into places that I was just not into.
No, but but a lot of them are really revered. And my favorite thing in the world is to go on the internet and have somebody say, "Now this is Star Wars,"
right?
And sometimes it's something that I go, "Not for me, it's not."
Right.
But but like when Shadows of the Empire came out, I thought that novel was perfect because I thought it hit beat for beat the rhythm of a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
But a lot of people slagged it, denigrated it. I mean, look, Dash Rendar is not any great stroke of creativity, but it, Chewie with a flat top, okay, but still, it was fun, and I thought again from the rhythm, the energy, the action, I thought it mirrored a Star Wars film really well, whereas a lot of the novels didn't. Oh, Black Fleet Crisis! Oh my goodness, you ever read Black Fleet Crisis?
I don't think I did, actually. In fact, the fact that I don't think I did tells me I didn't, because I would probably remember it. Yeah.
There's a style of novel that really drives me nuts, and it proliferates in science fiction for some reason. I call them the walking around novels.
Okay.
Where they're just people and they're walking somewhere. And then something happens to them, but they're still walking there. And, nothing they're doing is actually the thing that's getting them there. The little side roads they go down aren't the things that are getting them to their destination. They just kind of happen to them along the destination.
Right.
And that frustrates me because I go, but what about this thing that you're going after? Let's talk about that.
Right.
Black Fleet Crisis had 3 different stories. And one of the 3 stories was a walking through a spaceship story.
Okay.
And for 3 books, they're walking through a spaceship. And the worst part of it was in the second book of the series, they actually split all 3 of them up. Instead of going chapter, here's a chapter with these guys, here's a chapter with these guys, they literally did part 1, all of the one story, part 2, all of one story, part 3, all of one story, and then move on. The first and third book, they didn't do that. But in the second book, they literally, a third of the book is them walking through a spaceship. They're trying to get to the bridge, and for some reason they have to start at the back, and they spend 3 books walking towards the bridge of the ship.
It sounds painful.
At the end of the third book, they get to the bridge of the ship. Spoiler alert. I didn't mean to do that. I apologize.
Well, it sounds like I'm glad I didn't read those books.
That was the thing about them. Like I say, I loved the continuity or the attempt at continuity with them. I loved, the flow and the growth of the characters and everything. But really, the best thing to do is just like Pablo wrote a book where he summarized them all. Mm-hmm. That's probably good enough.
That's good enough. Yeah, thank God there's so many YouTube channels that I can go and get things summarized for me because I can't keep up with all of it. And in fact, it's funny when I have authors on the show, that's what I absolutely need to get the kick in the pants to finish some of these books. Just and not because they're good or bad, but just because I think you said it somewhere in one of your blog posts somewhere, like we all, or I think it was in the notes of one of your shows. It's like, we all have like things to do and lives, and it's hard to be able to commit all that time to this sort of stuff. And, but it's interesting because we talked before about sort of that commitment and that sort of love of everything Star Wars. And there was a backlash to people who didn't want the EU to leave and felt that way. Interesting that you understood it. How did you feel about it though? Like, do you feel like we missed an opportunity to tell those stories?
No, because I knew they were going to kind of fold everything in. I mean, what frustrated me was my shelf, and that was, here I've built this shelf. The shelf's got to go.
Right.
What do we do with the shelf? I can't add to the shelf because this stuff is all, it contradicts it and it countermands it and everything. But I was excited about the opportunity to start fresh because, and I would say to people who would say, I can't believe they're getting rid of just can't believe they're getting rid of the expanded universe. And I said, look, here's the deal. 80% of it really sucked. It's okay. I mean, then they'll find a way to work in the 20%, and they might find a way to work in the things that were not that bad. And some of the things that were maybe a good idea but weren't executed well, they might be able to work that in too. So I was excited about it. I was just frustrated for my bookshelf. And I know that's kind of a weird thing, but when you get obsessive about things,
sure. And
I had meticulously curated this thing for decades,
right?
Only to have it all of a sudden, this is all gone.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was a band that I wanted to go see, and I had tickets. Me and I was young, like probably 14 years old. Me and this girl were going to go see this band, and then she gave the ticket to somebody else, and suddenly I hated that band. I was so mad at that band, and her too. But the point is, I understand.
Bay City Rollers never recovered.
Right. If I had only continued buying Bay City Rollers albums, they might still be touring. It's all my fault. I will take responsibility. But I understand that sort of, that's, all my stuff it's got a different, it's no less valuable, but it's got a different perspective. You and I talked a little bit about it offline, about a little bit about the sequel trilogy, but let me just ask you sort of, as you and I, it's interesting coming up through the very similar Star Wars life. And in a very similar state of mind when Star Wars came back. I read in an interview with you that you were just gung-ho and so excited about Force Awakens. Let's start with Force Awakens. How did that strike you? Was it what you wanted it to be?
Well, there's that whole what you wanted it to be thing, that whole defying expectations that we've heard about for the last 4 years.
Right.
I just wanted it to be really good. I wanted it to be really good and really special and I think Force Awakens, I think there was a lot that was special about it. Now, part of my problem the first time I saw Force Awakens, and I loved it, don't get me wrong, I do love the movie. I went and saw it this summer, last summer they were doing, during the height of the first wave of COVID, our movie theaters opened for private rentals.
Yeah.
And they made Force Awakens available. I rented a theater and went and saw it.
Cool.
In 2018, my wife got me a trip to New York City, and I saw the New York Philharmonic play the score as they were first starting that Star Wars in concert thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Actually, it might have been 2017. It was October 2017. They were just starting that Star Wars in concert thing, and we didn't know it was going to come around to everybody's town. So my wife took me up to New York, so we could spend a weekend going to see New York Philharmonic play The Force Awakens as they showed the film on the screen.
Wow!
And Alfred Newman, who did the Fox fanfare, one of his sons was conducting that night.
Oh wow, that's wild.
So yeah, it was just a great, and we were like on the third row. I have no idea how my wife scored those tickets, but it was wonderful, great night. But the weird thing for me the first time was, I was determined to see it on an IMAX screen. I've got to see it on an IMAX because that's the best thing ever.
Right.
And, I've got to see the best Star Wars ever on the best screen ever. And so we don't have one of those here. At the time, the only real IMAX was about an hour and a half away.
Mm-hmm.
And so we drove down to Jacksonville to see it. And by the time we got there, there was a huge line, and everybody who was a member of this theater got to go in first. It's like one of those museum theaters.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And so by the time my wife and I got in there, and Junior, my son, we were at the bottom front row on the far right, which you've listened to my radio show, you get that.
Yeah.
But
all making sense now.
Yes. And then there were some friends of ours who were there, and they were three of them on the far left of the theater on the same row.
Mm-hmm.
So this IMAX, the IMAX got the curved screen and everything. So we're sitting in the deep corner here, and the movie starts, and they do the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then the title, blasts on there with that first note.
Yep.
And then it goes off that way.
Oh.
And what did they change this? Are they doing this different? And then this crawl starts coming up, and the crawl starts going over here.
Oh, because of the curve, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, what the hell is? Why did they do? And this is because we're sitting at a bad angle. But it was. I mean, we had a great time. It was a wonderful movie. I came out, and we immediately, friends of mine that were there, went over to Cheesecake Factory and put a recorder in the middle of the table and recorded a podcast just talking about it.
Yeah.
And one of my first takes was, it's kind of a remake of the first film, but I don't have a problem with that. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I really did.
Yeah.
It was very enjoyable. I mean, it's got its issues, sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't break any new ground, and that was a problem for me and that was my worry going into the sequel trilogy was, George Lucas always found a way to break new technological ground.
Yep. And
I didn't think we really moved the medium forward in this instance. In fact, they go back and go, well, we're shooting all on film. Isn't that great? And I'm going, no, not really. We've got all these practical effects, and you look at it, you go, there's a lot of digital in this movie. You guys, I mean, it's great. You got some practical effects. There's a lot of digital. And what's wrong with digital?
Right. You're making the best possible movie, right? You have the best
you have the best tools. You know, I'm not going to write a book with a chisel and a stone. Doesn't make sense.
I like that. And, I think that's one of the great things about Mandalorian is it's sort of back to how can we do this with the latest technology without doing it just for the technology. They're using it to tell the story. And man, I'll tell you,
volume.
The volume is amazing. And there was, it's rare. And you and I talked at the very beginning here about sort of being interested in how movies are made and speaking that language. I had no idea that if any of those scenes were now, of course, now that we know, right? Much like with Star Wars, once there's a blue screen, I see it.
I see the matte line now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now with, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in the volume and I can see it all, but at least I understand it a little bit and I look at it slightly differently. But those first 8 episodes, they were in a desert somewhere shooting the film. I had no idea. So
yeah, it's amazing. Did you ever get to do the VR experience that they had
in Disney?
Yeah.
Yes. The what's that called? I can't remember what it's called.
It was called Secrets of the Empire.
Right. Yep. Where you put on the vest and the
did it 3 times.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it was one of those things. It's funny because when they first did it, we went down there and we were having to buy tickets for it, and we had to do it in advance. So I walked in there thinking you just walk in and just pay them money and do it. And no, you can't do that.
Yep.
You've got to book it in advance. Okay, so we went out, we go and advance it. The Void. Thank you, Mikey. Yep. And it was like $35 a head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going and for it, they said it was going to be like 10, 15 minutes. And I thought, well, that's kind of a ripoff, but I can't not do this.
Right.
And so I go and I sign up, and then we do it. And I come out and I go, okay, when can I give you my money again?
Yeah, I got to do this again. Yep.
So I wound up doing it 3 different. We did it. My wife and I were there. We did it, and then I was so excited about it that we made another trip the next month so I could bring my son so he could experience it.
It was it's funny because I have the Oculus Quest and I've played Vader Immortal, which is really cool. But there's something. I mean the way they bring the heat from the lava from Mustafar and you can hear you literally are touching. It's so good. And so it's funny that you said that you were there and you had the long line. By the time I finally got down to Florida to do it, it was one of those things where I had an evening open. So I was like, I'm going to run over and see if I can get in. And there was 2 people ahead of me. It was one of those, just keep going and go. But, and it is funny how the technology just becomes sort of commonplace now. Right. And
it was an amazing experience for us. And it really, I'll tell you what got me was we're doing the whole thing, and everything is just amazing because for those of you who have not seen it, you literally are wearing a VR headset and you're walking around with the headset on, and you're interacting with doors and walls and panels and switches and buttons. But at the very end, when we're in the hold after the mission is over, and I looked over and there was an R2 unit there.
Yeah.
In my vision, in my goggles.
Yep.
And I just said, there's no way he's not there.
Yeah.
And I reached out, and sure as heck, I put my hand on an R2 unit.
Yeah.
And I that just blew me away.
Yeah.
That and the fun of I don't know how long it took you to open one of those doors, but there's one of those doors that's got a button sequence, and you're a little disoriented when you do it the first time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And K2SO just sits and mocks you mercilessly while you're doing it. It's great.
Yeah, it's if anybody gets that opportunity to take that experience, you absolutely have to do that.
Yeah. Well, they shut it down. It doesn't exist right now.
Is it like shut down for good, or is it shut down because of?
Yeah, the signs are down. It's it's toast. I'm hoping there's some way somebody can bring that back sometime, because it just, to me, it was transformative. It's transformative. It was so different than anything that's ever been done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. I didn't know it was gone. That's disappointing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's
sorry, file that away.
Right. Well, now you've ruined the entire.
Sorry. That's what I'm here for.
I'm done. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, Scott. So yeah, Force Awakens definitely had that sort of. I agree. I definitely had the point of view that it was. It felt like a reboot, but it was a fun reboot, and in my opinion at that time, that's kind of what they needed to do. To me, even because, and we didn't talk prequels, but real quickly, what was your take on the prequels? Because to me, that opening line from Lor Santeca, and it's funny, I can remember his name, but not the actor's name.
This will begin to make things right. Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow. Thank you. Yeah. And to me, that was like hey, all you fans who were pissed off about the prequels, we're starting over. Now it's funny. Since then, my mindset toward the prequels has changed, and I really like the Phantom Menace, which I didn't at first for a long time, but it felt like it was that sort of, here's what we're doing, we're rebooting. Like they were literally telling us that. How did you feel about the prequels?
I love the prequels. I'm sorry, I do. And honestly, I never. There was almost no Star Wars I would reject out of hand until much later in life, but. The prequels, I was on board for the Phantom Menace. Yeah, we had to eat at Taco Bell frequently, KFC frequently. I can't tell you how many times I dragged the family out to. It was Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut.
Yep,
and because they were all the what was called Tricon then, but now it's called Yum brands. But yeah, those. And so I'm just literally, we got to get that. Well, we still don't have all of them. We got to go back later. We got to. And that's, I still have so much of that stuff in my storage. My storage unit is sick. Storage unit, absolutely sick. But no, episode 2, huh?
It sounds like it's Rancho Obi-Wan South. I mean,
it is. Well, no, I got a buddy. I used to call it Rancho Obi-Wan by the Sea. He just sold his house, but he had 2 small houses built in his backyard that had nothing but Star Wars stuff.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And one of them was just like helmets like that. But like he had a full-size Anakin statue, and just all this stuff, and a Bose sound system around there with the soundtracks on loop and everything. It was just amazing. But no, episode 2 came out. I mentioned it came out, and by Saturday night, Sunday morning, before that Wednesday, I had it.
Yeah,
buddy of mine downloaded it, burned me some discs, and I'm watching it. By episode 3, I didn't get it beforehand, but I had it by the end of the first weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I always did was I always made sure I would still go see the movie at least 5-6 times, just to make sure that I wasn't taking money away from the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
Because they need, in fact, I will tell you, dirty little secret. One weekend I went to see Batman Begins, and I bought a ticket for episode 3 and then went and saw Batman Begins. It's like, I don't want episode 3 to not get my money if I'm at the theater.
I'm gonna take it away from Batman Begins, but I'm giving
take it away. Well, plus that was the Who's Your Daddy poster weekend. And I didn't want to, if you bought a ticket to see Star Wars, they gave you it was Father's Day weekend.
Oh, right.
And I was like, well, I want the poster, so I'm going to go see episode 3, and then I'll see you guys, and I'll walk back into the theater and see Batman with you.
That's funny. And it's weird, because I think one of the things that I've started to come around to, and the internet makes it difficult at times, is that fact that, it's admitting and you end up having to, because as we even said before, you end up having to take a side one way or another, right? Whether it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while.
There's no middle ground.
There is no middle ground, unfortunately. The middle ground is harder to find. And so for me, transparently, it took me years to get into Phantom Menace. I never loved Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith I really always kind of enjoyed that one. But I was always kind of like, burned by the prequels. And then Clone Wars came, and I didn't watch the Clone Wars movie. I couldn't watch in the theaters. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And
Oh, really?
See, and now here I am at this point. I'm able to finally admit that I'm okay with that. I admit that I didn't. There was a time when there was that Star Wars that I. But now it's funny. I look back at what it has done for the story, and now I actually appreciate it much differently. And I might also appreciate it differently because I'm watching it with my 8 and 11-year-old kids right there. To watch my son, I used to have in my 10 question segment, I used to have a question that was, who do you prefer, Jar Jar Binks, Ewoks, or Porgs? It's sort of the most divisive things from each trilogy. And my daughter said, well, that question's not fair. I love them all. And I was like, okay, I get it. It makes sense. So, but again, it's once you realize, and I think for me, the prequels, once I realized that is George's purest vision of what Star Wars is.
Yeah.
I can't take my eyes off it. I really, it's funny, even more so than the original trilogy, probably because I've seen them more, but I always discover something when I watch the prequels that I had missed before, or now makes a little bit different sense because of something else that I've learned in the interim.
The only thing, and I never go, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that. The only thing I would say, episode 2, I think I could make a better movie just by simply having Anakin and Padme, instead of having them roll around in the hills and that kind of thing and stare at each other and have awkward talk. This is the Empire Strikes Back of this series anyway.
Yep.
It's got a Fed in it. It's, and so my thing is, have them, we already know that they're assassins after Padme.
Right.
Why not have them get on the ship as they're supposed to? They're supposed to go to Naboo, but there's an assassin on the ship, and they're being chased. And then, this whole thing can be a chase. They can bond that way. It's not necessarily more realistic, but audiences tend to buy into a romance blossoming under high stress situations.
Right.
And it comes across less awkward teenagey.
Yeah.
But to me, I thought that would have been the one thing that I would have really done to the sequel trilogy or the prequel trilogy is I would have made the Anakin Padme storyline into a chase.
Right. I think that would have been and it would have felt less creepy.
Exactly. Yeah. There are scenes that it is tough to watch some of those scenes where, and I don't blame Hayden Christensen, as so many people did. And I don't blame Natalie Portman.
No.
You got to blame George for those scenes.
Yeah. Yep.
Because he not only wrote them, he directed them. He had every chance to make something different.
And that's what makes it such a pure George thing. And I think I've talked about this in the past, but this fact that Star Wars A New Hope he was surrounded by these legends. They weren't legends yet, but they were all about to become legends. And he took that feedback. And when you watch the prequels, the making of prequel stuff, it's him and a rubber stamp. And that's going to and now the stories there's still a phenomenal story underneath it. And I think that's why, as I look back at them, they mean more because the stories survive. You can say even some of the effects aren't Star Wars quality or whatever. I don't know, but certainly not. The stories that are underneath it have driven this entire thing that we have, and that alone makes them worthwhile, I think.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's dip our toe into let's put Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker into a 1-2 punch, because my first question will be, I know how you feel about Last Jedi. I know you didn't love Last Jedi. And I'm being, I'm starting it there, but before I get there, I wanted to, is Rise of Skywalker, does that movie work for you or not?
I love that goofy ass movie.
Okay.
And I love it because it is, have you ever gone to a friend's house and he's got like a 4-year-old kid who is doing everything he can to impress you and to make you happy and laugh at him and all that?
Yep.
That is Rise of Skywalker. That movie is trying so hard to make everybody love it that I can't take my eyes off of it. And I just go, you are so cute. I love you so much because you were trying so hard, because you know how divisive Last Jedi was.
Yep.
And let me just say this. I am very honest and outspoken about my dislike for the film and many of the things, and you and I have chatted about some of the things I've disliked about the film.
Yep.
And I will take the challenge to say some nice things about it, because I think there's some nice things to say about it. But I was never one of those guys who went on the internet and said, we've got to hate this. We've got to hate this film, and everybody hates it, and hate everybody who hates it. In fact, when I saw it the first night, I was acting in a play that weekend. And so I went to see the first screening Thursday night. Then Friday night, we're on stage, and everybody's in the dressing room, and they know that I'm the Star Wars guy. You know, everybody's got a Star Wars guy. And they all come to me, okay, you saw it last night. How was it? Should I go? And all I would say is, you need to go see it for yourself. I can't really tell you. You know, I didn't go, God, it was great. It was wonderful. I didn't say, boy, I really had some issues with it. I just went, go see it yourself.
Right.
And actually, by Friday night, I'd seen it twice because I saw it Thursday night and I saw it first show Friday morning. And this is not a joke. It's just true. I fell asleep the second showing during Canto Bight, and it was a better film. Although, again, to say something nice about the film, the designs of the guards on Canto Bight, straight up George Lucas.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Straight up George Lucas. And the other thing, the bomber at the beginning, and this was a neat thing for me. It's like Last Jedi got started on a good foot with me because they started showing the interior of the bombers. Like about 6 months before that, I had actually gotten to take a ride on a B-17, like a World War II vintage B-17. And the interior of that bomber at the beginning of Last Jedi looked like that B-17.
Yeah. Wow.
And that just really, it was like, man, they really went out of their way to make sure this was right. This was, cool World War II type stuff. Like George would have done.
Yep. Yeah.
I wasn't a huge fan, but I didn't go around telling, if people want to know, I'd tell them, but I didn't tell people to stay away. When it was in release, I tried not to harm it. But, and talked about the things I liked about it. But when Rise of Skywalker came out, it's funny because there's some people say, it tried to undo Last Jedi, and then other people, it confirmed Last Jedi. And I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it was trying hard to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
And for that, I have to love and appreciate it because we had a very divided fandom after The Last Jedi. And it's still, there's still parts of it. I think Mando's done a lot to bring us back together and stuff like that. But after Last Jedi, we had a very divided fandom. And I think Rise of Skywalker was like, let's try to bring everybody back together. And it obviously didn't succeed because there are a lot of people who have outright disdain for it. But I love it for trying it.
Yeah, it's funny you put it that way because and again, this is one of the things I love about doing the show is I get to think about things a little bit differently. And you're right. First of all, J.J. Abrams was in a position that I don't care who you are, you're trying to wrap up, as we were even talking about before. It's a multi-generational saga now. It's been with people like you and me since, for all of our formative years. And you have kids who are now just discovering it. And you have to wrap that story up. Impossible to do and make everybody happy. So there's that perspective. And it's really, and we talked about at the top with sort of the pyramid of fans. And at the end of the day, I love The Last Jedi story. I love what it's trying to do. And I fully recognize and understand people's issues with the perspective of how they built characters and things like that. But I love the story of it. That said, when I went to see Last Jedi with my normie friends, my friends who whenever this new Star Wars movie comes out, we take a day off of everybody takes a day off of work and we go and we watch it. And we walked out of Last Jedi and I was like, that was pretty good. And most of them honestly were like, I have questions. I'm not sure. We walked out of Rise of Skywalker. My feeling was, because I'm such a lower head, and I was like, well, they could have, and they were like, that was amazing. And the reason for it, and I say it's the Thanos effect. They're like, oh, I know the Emperor. That's cool. There's space battles. I can do that. There's lightsaber battles. Excellent. It's everything I want in Star Wars. And to me, I still see it as missed opportunity, but I don't hate the movie. Yeah. And as I said recently, it's like, I'm just thankful that there's more Star Wars coming out. Some of it I'm going to absolutely love. Bad Batch, I like it a lot. Do I love it? No. I love that what it's trying to do. I love that it closed out the Clone Wars in a really cool way. But did I love every episode? Nope. But I don't have to, right? There was enough of it that I loved, and that's cool.
The biggest thing that frustrates me about The Last Jedi, I think the biggest issue I really have with it is it ends and it just ends. There's no big cliffhanger, and I think that's one of the reasons that we didn't see as big an opening as we should have for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I don't think it was necessarily people disappointed in the last film. It was just there was no buzz generated by the end of that film. It just was over. At the end of Endgame, Thanos snaps his fingers, and the entire country is going, "What the hell happens now?" Spider-Man dissolved.
Right. Yep.
At the end of Empire Strikes Back, you don't have to. We spent 3 years going, "What happens to Solo?"
Yep.
And at the end of this one, you went, "Oh, they got away, thank goodness."
Well, that's a fantastic point because I remember vividly because there's the Thursday night guy that lives across the street from me. He's got 2 kids same age as mine. We go on Thursday nights, or we did before pandemic, to whatever the big movie was coming out, and that way we didn't have to worry about the kids and we could just nerd out about it. And leaving Last Jedi, I remember specifically saying to him, they don't really need another movie. Like, because it felt like it could have ended on that, Leia says we have everything we need, and and we go off into the sunset. And I think you might be, that's a really great observation, is there was like, okay, so we're going to add that third movie. Let me give you that third movie. Yeah.
Let me give you a what if. What if they're in the hold of the Falcon, they're flying off. Everybody's making nice and learning to meet each other and greet each other. And, we realize then Rey and Poe have just now met.
Right.
And, what if then the radio goes crackly and that message that showed up in Fortnite or whatever, the Emperor's broadcast.
Yep.
What if that goes out over the Falcon?
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, what? And then it irises down to the credits.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. We would have spent the next 2 years edge of our seats.
Yeah. What the heck was that? What? Why? How was that? And then it wouldn't even have mattered how they explained it. We would have all shown up.
Yep. Exactly. Right. The issues that people like me have with how did he come back wouldn't matter because we would have all theorized it anyway. And it wouldn't have, we would have fought about it in Twitter for 2 years until we figured it out and been wrong anyway. But you make a great point there. Yeah. I mean, your middle chapter does need to have a cliffhanger. And, Nick here in the chat is saying that the cliffhanger in The Last Jedi was like, was Skywalker's gone, Kylo's the new supreme leader, and the Resistance did get away, but in tatters. But I don't, Nick, I love you, but I don't know that that's enough of a cliffhanger to bring me back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's a really good point. And yeah. And we talked about before we got on the air with you wearing the Heir to the Empire shirt. I feel like Bad Batch, and this is why I thought some of it was really great. I love Omega, but have you watched Bad Batch at all?
I haven't, and I'll tell you, this is why I'm a bad fan. I just haven't made my way through I haven't made my way through Clone Wars yet.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck somewhere in season 2, and it's not that I dislike it.
Just bad people. It's
No, it's just I just haven't had time to sit and watch it because there's 100 episodes of the first 5 seasons, whatever, and then the finished and the 7th and the.
Yeah, but so without spoiling anything for you, because you should, if you get the chance, and you have several weeks off and whatever.
I own every season of Clone Wars that's been released on Blu-ray. I own them all.
Excellent.
Just haven't, I didn't stop buying them. I just haven't gotten around to them yet.
Well, I'll put it to you this way: look for a blog post from me for my people who listen and want to hear my thoughts. I will give it there, but I feel like Bad Batch is placing certain pieces of information that reach out to things. Well, they've confirmed that we saw Mount Tantus in the final episode of Bad Batch. Again, that's not really a spoiler at all, but so these sort of things, again, as you pointed out, and I think this is what Star Wars and Filoni and Favreau and Lucasfilm Disney combination right now is doing really well, regardless of what else we think about where they're coming from or what your position might be. They are doing exactly what you said. When you sat at the table talking to your friends, knowing that the EU was going to disappear, they're pulling the things that matter to fans. When Thrawn came back, I don't know about you, but I lost my mind. I was a huge Rebels fan. I loved Heir to the Empire and Dark Empire. And so anything Thrawn coming back was amazing. And I love what they did with the character. Did you watch Rebels?
I stopped watching it after a while because I realized it was a little Clone Wars heavy.
Right, and you
it was
needed those
becoming-
connections. Yes.
Yeah, and so I stopped watching it because I thought I got to go back and I'm one of those guys that's kind of anal about. I need to see all of these things before I see that. I have to build the blocks here. I have to put the foundation in place, and I'm
This is the guy
very
that
bad
had
about that.
49 boxes of continuity in Star Wars books. I'm not surprised, man. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, no. See, understand when I'm talking about the Star Wars books, I bought every hardcover, every paperback, every audio. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, all of it.
A completist. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, and I've had to break myself of that. My wife has really tried to break me of that, but one of the things we were going to talk about, I know we don't have time to get into all of it now, but one of the things that I know we were talking about is, when is something junk versus when is it a collectible?
Yeah.
My buddy called me one day in 2005 and said, "Hey, you remember that giant inflatable Darth Vader they had on top of Burger King?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I've got it." He goes, "You want it?" I said, "Yeah, how much?" He said, $50. I said, "I'll be there." So in my storage unit, I have a giant inflatable. You remember those things?
Yes, they said they put them like, yep.
Got it in the storage unit, just sitting there.
That's amazing. Well, it's honestly, and I think that's the thing about collecting, in general, and is it's the old phrase, one man's junk is another man's treasure, and I can't tell you how much of my junk I sold in like 1995 ish. This was just stuff I was like, I don't. And now a friend of mine actually sent me a project Millennium Falcon from 1980, I think it was. I don't think it was the first run. But it's the Falcon playset, which is just like, that's the ultimate thing. It's missing a couple parts. It needs to be cleaned up, but I'm willing to do it.
What parts is it missing?
Well, of course, it's missing the probe.
Okay, that's because I interviewed Anthony Bresnikan for my Star Wars Story podcast.
Yep.
And he started talking about the Falcon playset, and he said, the thing everybody loses. And I said, yeah, the disco ball. And he goes, no, the trap doors. And I was like, yeah, but the disco ball.
If you kept the disco ball and lost the trap doors,
yeah. Like, no, the disco ball. Trust me, that's the one we all lost.
Like it was gone in the first week. I don't know
exactly.
How that happened. But yeah, but again, it's the version that I have. It's not junk, but it's not. It needs work, but it's a nice sort of project to have. And geez, I'll tell you, yeah. If my friend called me and said, "You want that big inflatable Darth Vader for $50?" I'd have been there in 10 minutes. Like you probably were. You just ran right over. Hold on, I'll be right there.
Get it.
Oh man, that's amazing. So what I love about this conversation is it's very similar to the podcast. Now, are you still doing the My Star Wars Story podcast, or are you? I know you. I don't know when the last episode was, but it's a lot like this, and just sort of learning your Star Wars story, as the name implies.
Yeah, it is. It's I am still doing it. I'm not doing it. When I first started, I was doing it monthly, and I was. But after doing it for a couple of years, a couple of things happened. One, the whole fan wars broke out in 2017, and that really discouraged me because there were people that just wouldn't talk to other people.
Yeah.
And sometimes I was one of those people that wouldn't be talked to. And I just thought, we should be able to disagree and still share our love for Star Wars and still be able to have conversations and discussions. I mean, I've never understood the whole shutting other people out thing because you disagree with them.
Yep.
But it really dispirited me. The other thing was I was kind of coming to a place where I didn't feel I was doing my job as well as I should be doing it. And, my actual job where they actually pay me and that kind of all that weird stuff like that. And so I cut back on a lot of my podcasting activity just because I thought I really need to focus more of my energy and time on this. But I did an episode last year. I've got one episode that is in the last stages of actually almost being released right now. So I'm still doing it, but I'm going a lot slower than I used to with it. Just kind of when an interview really strikes me, or when somebody comes to me, really that's what it comes down to, is when people come to me and bug me until I get off my butt and do it. That's really the biggest thing.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, there's if it wasn't so darn hard to find a Star Wars podcast, I say that facetiously. There's just Wow, there's a lot of
It's not like it's missing in the grand scheme of things.
Right. You know what? I wish there was a Star Wars podcast out there.
Just one more.
We just need the one.
Yeah.
But no, but this, honestly, and so it's funny as we come near the end here. You and I think I find, if I'm remembering correctly, I think I literally at one point had you blocked on Twitter for some comment or something, and I don't know why. All I know is somehow Michael Nip, who is a patron here, and he's been on the conversation here with us. He said something about something, and I realized you were blocked. Now, here's the great thing. You and we spent an hour and 10 minutes talking Star Wars. We didn't even get into the fact that we talked about you being a talk show host. You're a conservative talk show host. I listened to your show because I was preparing for this. I will be honest. I probably wouldn't tune in if I'm being real, right? We just spent all this time talking about why we love Star Wars, and we were able to leave all that other stuff to the side. And I think that's an important lesson, I think, and something that I wish there was more of. To your point, yes, just because I don't love Rise of Skywalker, but every time somebody says it's their favorite movie, because there are a lot of people who it's their favorite of all Star Wars, I'm not going on Twitter and saying you're an idiot for not liking it. No. And when I say Last Jedi and somebody pops into my mentions and says you're an idiot for liking it, it's like, why are we doing that? But this is the kind of conversation. This is why Star Wars exists. One of the best things about Star Wars is that it's that starting point. It's that if I walk past you in the mall and you're wearing an Heir to the Empire shirt, I would be like, we're on the same wavelength. Even if we never said a word to each other, we'd have that starting point. And I think that's super important.
Well, and I think it can introduce things, and it's funny because we have to be really careful of our behavior now, because some people, they don't like the way you do things or approach things or whatever. I had a neighbor, and he was a brand new neighbor in the neighborhood, and I went over to his house. And I was giving him his mailbox keys and all this other stuff. And in his driveway, he had a big trunk, and he had a Millennium Falcon shirt on, one of those you get at Target and everything. And so I said to him, "How serious are you about that shirt?" And what I meant was, and some people in this day and age would go, "Oh, you were gatekeeping him." But I wasn't. I was trying to gauge whether or not I could really have a Star Wars conversation with him, or whether he was just a guy who thought the shirt was neat.
Yeah. Yep.
And I said, "How serious are you about that shirt?" And he goes, "I'm pretty serious." And he reached over and he opened the trunk, and he had a Boba Fett costume in the trunk.
Yeah, that's pretty serious.
Yeah, and he's got a stormtrooper armor, and he's a 501st guy. And I was like, "Okay, you're okay, good. That's now awesome. We can have a conversation." But I was trying. I couldn't figure out another way to get into that.
Right.
I don't. So you like Star Wars? And people often do this whole thing where a guy saw me with a Star Wars shirt and he started quizzing me and wanted to know how much I knew. A lot of times these guys aren't trying to shut you out. They're just trying to gauge where you are in relation to them. They're just socially awkward. A lot of us are socially awkward.
100%. Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't know how to get into that conversation. So I would just say to people, if you think somebody's gatekeeping you, when they quiz you for your shirt or whatever, try to hit them up, engage them, try to find a different way to interface with them. But you may find that person's trying to reach out to you and not try to shut you out, but try to include you in their world.
That's a great lesson. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's kind of no different than if I'm a big hockey fan, I've been a Flyers fan since I'm 5 years old. And when I see somebody wearing a Flyer shirt, I ask them who their favorite Flyer is, right? That's the same question. Yep. If they say somebody relatively new, I know probably where when they came into the Flyer fandom. And if they say somebody classic, then, and it's not because I'm going to say, well, you're not a true fan because you've only been watching for 4 years. And I get so frustrated with the phrase true fan, because I mean, if you watch The Mandalorian, you're a true fan. If you read a comic book, you're a true and enjoy it, you're a true fan. If you have 49 boxes worth of Star Wars books, you're a true fan. If you do a weekly podcast show and talk about everything from deep lore to just bullshit Star Wars, you're a fan. It doesn't matter. And I think that's the thing. And I like that concept that you just brought up, because I think it's important to recognize that it's, as long as you're not a if he said, well, no, I kind of think it's a cool shirt, you wouldn't have been like, oh, well, you're not a fan.
I just would have said, okay, I know at what level to engage him.
Right. Cool. I'm a Star Wars fan too. All right, good.
Yeah, me too. Like it. But what I found was this guy who now we're great friends. And he's a terrific guy. He had to move to New Jersey and sell his house, but he and I still keep in touch over social media and everything. And it's because I ventured that question.
Yep. That's it. Star Wars has that ability to open those doors to people, and I think that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. Scott, where can people find you on the interwebs and keep up with you and listen to you?
The question is, do they want to?
Well,
that's probably
that's a question I can't answer for people.
Yeah. I'm on Facebook under my name, Scott Ryfun. I can be followed there. I'm on Twitter at Ryfun, Ryfun. I've got my Star Wars story as well at my Star Wars story on Twitter. It pretty much comes alive when I have an episode, and that's probably it. I should do more with it. But again, my big focus is doing my real job really, really well. And, the other thing all kind of has to be secondary right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's still out there, and heck, I mean, go dredge up old episodes of Dinner for Geeks, for crying out loud, which is a podcast we used to do.
That's awesome.
If you really want to do a deep dive, and that was always fun because literally I stole Favreau's Dinner for Five, and we just 4 nerdy guys would sit at a table and record dinner conversation, and I'd trim it up a little and put it out.
That's great, and that was before there were an unlimited supply of Star Wars podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm on the iHeartRadio app. If you want to catch the Daily Show, it's there. It's on 98.7 WGIG, or you can look for my name, Scott Ryfun, and you'll find me holding one of my best friends ever, and that's me and my podcast.
That's awesome. Good. Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. If you'll come back someday, I'd love to have you back, and we'll do the 10 question segment together. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Sounds fair.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much. Before I let you go, I want to get you to do a little Scott Ryfun you're listening to Around the Galaxy bumper for me, if you don't mind.
All right. How radio do you need me to do it?
As radio as you like. We have a little bit of everything.
This is Scott Ryfun, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy. Does that work?
Man. That's perfect. I'm going to hit the end broadcast here. Hang on one second.